welcome to the third in a four-part series for executive development, sponsored by the National Institute of Corrections and the Public Welfare Foundation. We thank both NIC and the Public Welfare Foundation for funding this effort, and the Chief Officers of California, specifically Stephanie Anderson, for assisting in what we hope are helpful sessions for probation executives in California. My name is Zach Delpera, and I'm a Senior Associate with the Crime and Justice Institute at CRJ. I will be your host today in a session that will provide information on workforce planning, what is, and how spending some time and effort on strategic issues in this area now, your organization will benefit greatly in the years to come. This webinar was developed for Chief Probation Officers, Directors, and their seconds in command, but I'm aware that some chiefs have asked others in their organizations to attend. We welcome all of you who are on the webinar and listening in. We that if you have questions for our panelists, as you use the chat, you can use the chat section or the QA section of the page to ask your questions, and those sections are on the bottom right-hand side of your screen. We answer as many questions as we can. To introduce our presenters today, I would like to take a second to thank our staff at CJI, specifically Kristen Nielsen, for coordinating the material and the technology behind today's webinar. I would also like to tell you just a little bit about the Crime and Justice Institute at CRJ. CJI is a nonprofit organization that provides nonpartisan policy analysis, consulting, and research services to improve public safety throughout the country. Our goal is to make criminal and juvenile justice systems more efficient and cost-effective to accountability for achieving better outcomes. Our strength is in our ability to bridge the gap between research, policy, and practice in public institutions and communities, and evidence-based, results-driven recommendations. Let's introduce our presenters. Connie Champenois is a consultant with CPS HR Consulting. That is an innovative, client-centered human resources and management consulting firm specializing in solving the unique problems and challenges faced by government and nonprofit agencies. They are a joint powers authority, a self-supporting public agency. They understand the needs of public sector clients and have served trusted advisor to their clients for more than 25 years. Ms. Champenois has over 20 years of generalist experience in both the public and private sector. Her career, Connie has created human resource departments and led organizations through organizational and cultural change. She is part of the executive team in both the public and private organizations she has served. She has experience in recruitment and selection, compensation and benefits, labor and employee relations, strategic planning, organizational design, policy development, training and development. She also has experience in workforce planning as a result of mergers and acquisitions, downsizing, and the restructuring of organizations. Recently, as the principal management consultant, she has led consulting projects ranging from classification and compensation studies, executive recruitment, review hiring practices, competency development, and the development of workforce planning tools, and a workforce planning website for a national nonprofit. She has a degree in labor and industrial relations from the University of Wisconsin and is a certified facilitator for the Center for Creative Leadership's 360-degree benchmarks assessment program. Our second presenter is Mark Hendershot. Mark is the Vision Director for Policy Planning and Analysis for Maricopa County Adult Probation in Phoenix, Arizona, with over 28 years of service. His responsibilities include data systems, strategic planning, policy, victim services, and a 24/7 radio communication center. He's project director for the National Institute of Corrections CJI Technical Assistance Grant, Evidence-Based Practices from 2007 to 2010. Mark serves as a consultant, participates in peer reviews, and serves on numerous local, state, and national work groups to improve justice data systems and implement evidence-based practices within community corrections. Mark has a bachelor's in justice studies and a master's in psychology from Northern Arizona University. Our third presenter is Mike Collins. Many of you in California know Mike Collins. He was Orange County's project coordinator for their Integrated Effective Probation Practices project. The project involved 3 years of technical assistance and included restructuring their performance evaluation system. Mike hired from Orange County Probation last year after 33 years and is now working with California Corrections Standards Authority. He has a business degree from Cal State Fullerton in political science and a master's of public administration from Cal State Long Beach. And let me just mention that we will be recording this session and posting it on the Crime and Justice Institute's webpage. If you want to share this information with others, you can direct them to our website, which is on the several of the slides, and they can view it and listen to it there. Now, ask yourself, why conduct a webinar on workforce planning? As you know, California criminal justice systems throughout the state, and especially probation departments, have seen a number of significant changes in the work that's done on a day-to-day basis. Just in the last 2 or 3 years, 678 formalized the shift to evidence-based practices, and more recently, AB 109 has not only provided new population of offenders on supervision, but also mandates collaborative approaches to problem solving, community corrections partnerships. All these changes require a new set of skills that staff may or not currently have. To develop the pool of staff in an organization who can effectively implement evidence-based practices, we're administrators to do more than review current staff and consider subjectively their skills and abilities. It requires a strategic consideration of workforce planning options. Those workforce planning options are what Connie will be covering today. But before we start, we want to take a couple of quick polls of our audience, sense of what you've experienced. So the first poll we want to ask you to participate in is on workforce challenges. And the question is, what are some of the workforce challenges you are experiencing in your organizations? And on the hand side of the page, you'll see the questions, and take the next minute or so and feel free to all of the appropriate responses that apply. So go ahead and fill those out. Okay, that's about up, and we will be seeing the results here hopefully quickly. The question was, what are some of the workforce challenges you're experiencing? And here's results of the poll. It looks like 5 that responded said law enforcement approach, followed by resistance of EBP staff. Those are the 2 big ones, but as you can see, a little bit of all of them. Getting any responses is an increase in turnover. So a law enforcement approach, a resistance of EBP, those will be the big challenges that you face in in the workforce. Next poll we want to take real quickly is based on your top staff challenges. What tools did you wish you had to help you with those challenges? Okay, so now that we know the challenge, we've asked you that. What are the tools that you wish you had? So based on your staff challenges, what tools do you wish you had to help you with those challenges? So let's take a minute and go ahead and fill those out. Ten more seconds left. Okay, and if we could calculate the results of this poll. Just a minute to perform that. And it looks like improved processes and improved processes to manage employee performance. So it looks like employee performance is the area that you wish you had help with. And I believe Connie's going to go into that, followed by Mark Hendershot and Mike, who both had experience in workforce planning efforts around employee performance management. So with that, having a sense of what you're interested in, let me turn it over to Connie to start.
Thank you, Zach. These are very similar issues that came up in both Maricopa and in Orange County. So we can certainly talk about some of the solutions that they use to overcome some of these areas that you've mentioned as possible problems for your workforce. The other thing I want to share with you today is what I think is a promising solution for many of the leadership facing these changes in their departments, agency, or organization. This is workforce planning. And this helps organizations get the right people with the right skills and competencies in the right place at the right time in order to improve organizational performance. If you're to really identify exactly how you're going to move forward with your organization. And one of the key components of this process I'm going to share with you today is that you do not need to have a large human resources function in your organization to do this work. This is an organizational process. It is not a human resources process. If you have HR staff, they can certainly be involved in this, and they're very helpful. The way that this process was designed, it was designed to be done with teams within the organization. It's a way of really doing business, not a project, and you'll see the importance of that thought as we go through today. Experiencing today now in California is what we have seen with a lot of our clients, and that is the heightened policies or legislative programs or new innovative programs that people either are adopting or are being asked to adopt with the assumption that if you have these great policies, you're going to have better outcomes. And this is what we see happening in a lot of organizations. But what we forget is that it takes staff to apply these policies and deliver these services. So we believe this is the way that change really happens. You really can't get there without a prepared workforce. And as you're seeing, there's resistance to the evidence-based practice model. They have to change their thinking, their behaviors around the way they approach offenders. All of that change has to occur in order for departments and agencies to have the outcomes they want to have along this initiative that you're going through. The approach that we're going to talk about today and our point of view around workforce planning is that it's a comprehensive approach to workforce issues. Sometimes people think, well, they'll just take on the latest new idea, like they go to a conference and they hear about a new interview process, or they hear about some new way of recruiting through social media, and they come back and try to implement just a piece of it. What we're talking about here is a very comprehensive approach to your staffing and workforce issues. We all believe that in order to make change happen in an organization, you have to have collaboration across all your departments within the agency. So this approach that we're talking about today is team-based and requires people from all levels in the organization and positions in the department. It also has people from frontline supervisors, management, from your IT and your budgeting department at different times throughout the process they would be involved. So it's a way of moving change through the whole organization through collaboration and engagement. By using this team-based approach and training people on how to do this, it is sustainable for the organization. It then can become a way of doing business. So not only will you look comprehensively, but you'll look at how to recruit and select. You'll use data to inform your decisions. You look at your existing staff, analyze their skills and abilities, and structure your performance management practices to support the new work. Again, collaboration, this is not an HR-only process. It involves everyone in this process through team-based work. And as I said before, engagement is critical to not only the ability to garner buy-in for these changes, it also enriches the process by developing custom policies and procedures that will work in their environment. Through their engagement and buy-in, you're more likely to be successful in implementing a process that will have, as I say, legs. It will continue to work for the organization. Through the use of workforce planning teams, the agencies train staff in the development of workforce plans. They begin to think differently about the staff. This is a model. It's a very common model. You may have seen this in even strategic planning. And what we're trying to show here is that it is comprehensive, and it needs to be aligned with the changes the organization is contemplating or in the midst of doing. So, as Zach had said, evidence-based practice and AB 109, those changes are impacting your organization, and now taking those strategic changes to the way you operate and aligning your workforce will ensure, as from our point of view, a prepared workforce that can do the work. So, the first step is to have that strategic alignment, what we need to do the new work. We need leadership commitment around this process, as it is a team event. You need leadership to support people to do this work. You need a project management focus, and you need to identify the outcomes you'd like this team to achieve. Next step, and this is critical in this model, is data collection. You have to use data to inform your decisions. Without having collected data for your organization, you will not be able to make the right decisions on what gaps you have and then what strategies you want to implement. So you may already collect data around turnover, demographics, male, female, racial demographics. You collect exit interview information, employee survey data. You may have information or data on workers' comp. And you have identified competencies in your organization based on your previous work design. Excuse me. The step is to analyze the data you've collected, compare your current talent to your future talent needs, and identify your staffing and competence gaps. And we'll talk more about competencies in the next few slides. Data analysis will inform your implementation or gap closing strategies. You may choose to take on all these changes in your organization, or you may decide to prioritize those that are important. And today, from the poll, performance management appears to be a significant challenge for all of you, and that may be something that would come out of your study as well as an issue. In order for a process like this to be effective, you must always evaluate, are we what we said we were going to do, are we implementing at the timeline we thought we were going to do, and are we achieving the outcomes? This is not a one-time only process. It's ongoing, and many of these gap closing strategies will take several years to bear fruit, as they say, or to have an impact. We do have a chat function, and if you have a moment and you have you can go onto the chat function and indicate, I'd like to know what kind of workforce data you collect, and what do you do with it? Do you use it in any decision making at this point?
And if I can just interject, when you use chat box, just send to, and right to that there's a drop down screen, and select all participants. All the panelists and the participants can see your response.
Thank you. While you're thinking about the data that you collect or analyze, I'd like to share an example that might drive home why this is so important. One of our clients, a commissioner, was experiencing high turnover in her frontline staff. Her managers all believed it was due to low salaries. They were not, they have any data to show anything differently. They did not have conduct exit interviews. They didn't know why people were leaving. And their selection processes were based on hiring from their contract agency staff rather than recruiting of talent and interviewing for the competencies required for the work. So when we started working with them, we asked those questions, how do you know it's salaries? And it was like the collective wisdom, well, that is exactly what it is. That's why people are leaving. So we conducted an exit survey of all those that had left the organization within the last 6 months. And then we also conducted a similar survey with the managers of those folks who had just left and asked them questions about, for the employees who left, why did you leave, where did you go, what were the reasons, etc. And for the managers, we asked them, what did they think about the talent that they did have, and would they rehire them? When we got the information back from those that had left, the employees, the overwhelming reason for leaving was their supervisor. They felt that they weren't being trained or onboarded appropriately, that the supervisor wasn't fair, that the supervisor wasn't there when they needed them, and they felt that they couldn't work for that person. When we talked to managers about would you rehire any of the folks that left, over 60% of those that left they would not rehire. The solutions for that issue really were around training the supervisors to be more engaged with their employees, to be more coaches and mentors, and making them more engaged on the onboarding of new hires, and also to change the selection process so they started to hire for the work and for the behaviors needed to do this job. Had the commissioner only listened to the middle managers, she moved on and tried to fight hard for a salary increase during a time when that would be very difficult, use a lot of political capital, and she still would have had the same problem that she had before she raised salaries. Again, working with the client over time, they did change their selection process. They did change the way they trained their managers and how they held them accountable, or the supervisors, how they held them accountable for managing their staff, and they were able to reduce their turnover significantly. And Mark Hendershot will talk a little bit about data they used in Maricopa County.
Would you put that in now, Connie?
Yeah, it'd be nice, Mark.
Okay. One of our department's strategic goals is to improve staff retention and compensation. To meet this goal, we set an objective to reduce badged staff turnover in their 3 years of employment. For the objective, we measure when staff leave and through an exit survey the reasons why they leave. Our fourth objective was to seek an employee demographic that represented the county's population demographic to ensure adequate representation. So we compared the percentage of Black, Hispanic, non-Hispanic whites, Native American, and Asian Islanders for alignment with our general population in the county. So that's an example of 2 data sets, pretty simple ways of counting so we can measure our goals.
I think exactly. They don't have to be burdensome data sets. They can be pretty straightforward, in some cases right off your payroll systems. But it is important that will inform the session, and that's kind of the key point that we're trying to make, is knowing what's the problem, and then you can devise the solution. Then I want to talk about our competencies. This workforce planning process that we're designed here and we're talking about is based on competencies. I want to make the distinction here between, you'll hear the word competency a lot in training, and when they're talking in training about competencies, many times they're talking about, once I take this training program, I will be competent in filling out a form, or driving a car, or running a piece of equipment, that type of competency. It's more skill-based. The competencies that we're talking about in our process that inform most of the HR functions are behavioral competencies. They're personal attributes and other characteristics that are associated with or predictive of successful job performance, like decision-making, teamwork, building trust, adaptability. As I said, I had a lot of experience both in the public and private sector, and when managers would come into my office and say, I've got to hire someone, they always start talking about, I need someone who's adaptable, who I can trust, who has stress tolerance, who's going to show up, who plays well with others. And invariably, at the end of the conversation, they might get to some of the skills they need or the education requirements. But mostly they are looking for those behaviors. Usually the biggest employment issue a supervisor will have will be around behaviors. Conflict with team members, not showing up on time, or doesn't meet deadlines. These are the things that over time as an HR person I've come to believe are almost more critical in many cases than the skill sets that people need for the job. Because as I mentioned, the managers would always say, I can teach them how to do the work. I cannot teach them to be a good team player or to be flexible. And an example in the private sector that I find interesting is Southwest Airlines. That's one of the most profitable airlines in the industry, and they put great effort into their hiring process, and they hire for fit. They hire for their values and their culture, not for the knowledge, skills, or abilities the person has. For instance, they assess a sense of humor in their group interview. So, and you may have flown on Southwest, they use a lot of humor in their everyday work, and I think that's very important to their culture, and they design their systems around that. And so they believe that's one of the reasons, because they hire for their values, that they're a successful airline. This integrated competency model is an example of how, through workforce planning and identifying the competencies needed for the specific job or the new work that you're implementing, these competencies can be used in the recruitment process, selection, performance management, professional development, employee retention, and succession planning. They're really the foundational pieces for a strong human resources function. This example of a competency model for an adult probation supervisor. I wanted to show this to you because it kind of shows how, when you're moving to new work like evidence-based practice, these are the competencies that this organization selected for that change. On the left, you'll see the 12 competencies that were selected. We use a large competency library. We go through a very intensive selection process with groups of managers, supervisors, and frontline to select these. But this is their model, and these are the competencies they believe are important for the work they are tasked to do in evidence-based practice. This column is recruitment and selection, and you'll see that there are X's in front of several of the competencies. What we use in this model is we try to select for the behaviors that cannot be trained. It's better for in the selection process to hire for those behaviors. It's very difficult to train someone to be stress tolerant or to have trust or have integrity. Those things are very difficult to train on. So you want to hire for those as you increase your staff or as turnover occurs and you bring in new staff. It's important to hire for those behaviors that are difficult to train. The second column is performance management. And this organization looked at on a scale of 1 to 3, 3 being proficient, which are the performance, the competencies they wanted to focus on in performance management. So a 2 meant that they weren't proficient in the area, 1.5 even less proficient. So again, they started to kind of do a little bit of a gap analysis with their existing staff and are going to focus on these competencies in their performance management process. You can take those competencies then into your professional development or training program and determine either individual plans based on an employee's weakness, or you can take it and say, I'm going to do a whole training session around communication because I feel our supervisors need to get better at that. And so it could be kind of a mandatory training around communication skills for all the supervisors. So this is how a matrix would work in an organization. Learn how to select for the competencies you can't train for, how to use it in performance management, and then how to use it in professional development. This speaks to competencies, in my opinion. You can teach a turkey to climb a tree, but it's easier to hire a squirrel. And it's better to hire up front for the values and competencies you need than try to change that person once they're on board. So again, just going through the whole process, what we're really talking about is a comprehensive approach to your staffing issues. And some examples of once you've done your data collection and you've identified your competencies and you've looked at gap analysis, you'll start to look at some gap closing strategies. It could be an aggressive recruitment plan. It could be a competency-based selection, performance management, and development program like we just talked about for that adult probation supervisor. Or it could be a retention strategy, how to retain people, again, having better supervision, tracking why they're leaving, and also then maybe some employee attitude surveys to stay on top of issues affecting your staff. And then job redesign. Again, with some of the work changes that are happening in California, a job redesign may be necessary. Next, Mark is going to talk about his experience with competencies and workforce planning.
Thank you, Connie, and thank you, CJI, for your invitation to share our experiences. In Maricopa County, we recognized that educational development was one of our top 2 challenges in becoming an evidence-based organization. Educational development is primarily workforce development. We understood that we needed to adjust our hiring practices to new demographics, seeking candidates who, in addition to demonstrating a potential to balance rehabilitation and community safety, also the traits, the soft skills associated, and the skills associated with data-driven decision-making. We also need to revisit our promotional processes by targeting supervisors and managers who would support and mentor EBP. All of these materials that I will be presenting will primarily focus on the supervisory promotion process. Each spoke in this slide represents core business practices Maricopa identified as critical to developing a workforce. It's a magnified view of Connie's previous slide representing integration of competencies with business practices. Maricopa recognized that these independently managed business processes should be aligned, and in fact, they depend upon each other to increase their individual and cumulative effectiveness. We believe that by bringing these business processes onto a common foundation, we will deliver to staff a consistent message. So staff would see over time that hiring, training, evaluating, promoting, etc., all of these different spokes from these same competencies. Every time they hear the competency referred to in these processes, it's reinforced as an EBP value, and then that EBP value becomes part of your business culture. So the concept that binds and unifies all of these business processes is competency development. Using competencies, we believe that we would also strengthen our efforts in support of bringing current workforce into the future, engineering our workforce development, building managerial capacities, and succession planning. Competencies should reflect your agency's mission, vision, values, goals, philosophies, etc. It really needs to be a reflection of your organization. By using competencies to align expectations and business processes, management communicates that consistent message with a continuity of purpose. Competencies standardize expectations and ensure that staff are rated on the same criterion regardless of their location or who their supervisor are. Now, Connie's gone through the model, but just real quick in review, competencies are the knowledge, skills, behaviors, personal attributes, and other specialized characteristics that are associated with or predictive of superior job performance. So, examples of Maricopa's supervisor competencies included building trust, collaboration, communication, conflict management, continuous learning, etc. Within each competency, an attribute. So you've got three layers in a competency. The bottom layer underneath competency is the attribute. So these are tangible descriptions of the traits. For example, the competency of building trust, Maricopa selected the tangible attributes of commitments, competence, truthfulness, integrity, fighting, and values others. Now, building blocks of attributes, then, are the behavioral anchors. And those are short narratives that define, in your business terminology, those behaviors which exemplify supervisory performance, the good, bad, and the ugly. So you detail behaviors at the levels that you have in your performance appraisal. Maricopa has 5 performance levels of outstanding, excellent, meets expectations, does not meet expectations, and unacceptable. There are no ready-made blueprints tailored to fit the culture of your organization. Competence building is a process which only your workforce can create. It's an opportunity to align your business core processes with real expectations to represent your department. I'm going back and forth here. We put together a team. We commissioned a design team, the evidence-based steering committee commissioned a team to be responsible for this task. We asked division managers to select good representatives who would provide a balanced perspective and to give the team the authority to competencies. On a side note, organizational surveys had identified Maricopa's management team in need of focusing on building trust and pushing decision making down. So this was helping us along our EBP journey. Suppose we need representation of staff from all levels and transparency that brings along with it. We focus groups representing a diagonal section of staff to ensure up and down and lateral feedback. The value of the process is tapping the input from all staff, including support staff. We use directors and supervisors from badged and non-badged ranks to build supervisor competencies. We also invited our court HR, the psychologist, and our manager of training to participate. We now regret, we see in hindsight, that we would have included line officer staff. We're sure we would have received lots of ideas about what a good supervisor and a poor supervisor from them. Additionally, when it's time to roll out, you can press that this new system is one that belongs to them, with their feedback, their ideas. They built it. The design team was trained by Connie's group, CPS, on building competencies. A facilitator and a wordsmith was provided to keep the team on task and to document the process. Once the group is together, that multi-level collaboration uncovers the process of change. It eases suspicions and provides a voice to all levels to change and to vet ideas. Thinking in the process makes for healthy creation, builds up and buy-in, and it takes advantage of the multidisciplinary institutional knowledge that you have in your departments. As of implementation, staff appreciate that their interests were included. So if you use the feedback loop, go back to them, let them know what you learned from them and how you used it. And so happy when their supervisors are on board. Competency and attribute selection. So of the three layers here, the competencies and the attributes. Identified first the competencies which exemplified ideal supervisors, and also those which did not exist in our supervisors who underperformed or did not make it as supervisors. We knew we needed both. We need to consider both of those areas. Then the next step is narrowing your competency selections down. There exists many competency libraries. They're prevalent on the internet, and they have dozens and dozens of competencies, so it can be tough to weed out all these wonderful attributes. But remember that in the unified model, if you use this, if you go to the work to build this, it'll also become those categories upon which you will evaluate staff's performance. And we selected 13, and that's way too many for a supervisor. We didn't want to be evaluating performance based on 13 competencies. And then after that, we identified 5 attributes of the competency specific to our culture. So competency libraries also have plenty of suggestions for attribute selection. Last piece, that third layer, is developing behavior and behavioral anchors, which you tailor your behavioral narrative definitions to describe your workplace. So on a large grid, you'll just have the attributes on the side, and you'll just go off and start to detail out what is a behavioral anchor for somebody who is not acceptable, somebody who is meeting expectations, and somebody who's outstanding. Your team uses their expertise to craft examples of these different types of people. You keep behaviors generic to cover all elements under the classification. Uses management reports with staff to review performance. work in the field, in pre-sentence, in pre-trial. That way you're not talking about doing things that are absolutely specific. You want them to be generic across the channel for which you're developing. Regard one works in the organization as a supervisor, equals work across all disciplines. So consistency is important, especially when you have staff who are transfer, and you want that performance appraisal to transfer with those competencies. For example, communication. And pre-sentence communication is very important in terms of written and verbal needs, not as much as in the field, but it's there. So you want that to move forward. Transfer. In MIPA, we emphasize that meeting expectations is a high standard. Journeyman level work, it's not a grade. So you had people feeling before that if they got landed in the middle of our press with 5 different layers, that it just meant they were getting a C grade. We have to emphasize that meeting expectations is a high standard. So and this team working together is a wonderful opportunity to have subordinates participate in the process, and they have a lot to offer and see issues from many perspectives. So once we built these competencies, then we use these in our next hiring process for supervisors. It's in the vetting process of identifying those minimum qualifications, and this is the ADs have predefined basic qualifications: background, education, performance. Next level is preparing the candidates. Under this new process, we're much more candidate focused. We provide a candidate briefing packet for people who apply. This is a wide departure from traditional oral board environments, which measured a candidate's ability to withstand pressure and think on their feet and demonstrate poise. The pack sent about a week prior to the interview, and it shares the process, how it works, the competencies, and how they're going to be evaluated. The candidates are asked to arrive a half an hour early, and at which time they're given questions to review, because we're asking behavioral-based questions. We want them to have examples in their mind so that we can get good answers from those folks. Based competencies, those that we would pick out of our main competency library, are really the soft skills. It's the people skills, and we ask questions in the behavioral-based interview style, which again is a departure from the traditional structured interview where qualifying questions are not allowed. So this is an open interview which allows for candidates questions and follow-up by interviewers. We supervisors and directors in behavioral-based interviewing to run all these panels. Behavioral-based interviewing is a skill that's relatively easy to teach, which asks the candidate to draw from their personal experiences on several levels. So we ask them to tell us about a time that something happened in their life that is relative to that competency. What actions did they take? How did those turn out? Score sheets that measure the response are all based on those attributes that you've already selected. So when you use this process, you pretty much have your score sheets, all the materials together to build those and to make that an objective process. The qualitative and quantitative competencies. So these are the hard skills, those that tell us what our analytical skills are. We give the data exercise. So how is it that they use this data? For example, we might give them 6 months of case performance at a unit view and ask them to interpret that. Share ability to summarize business data, trends, implications. And we may ask them to provide us with a mock presentation. And the audience may be a group of managers, or we may simulate an employee who's having difficulty meeting their caseload performance standards. We want to see how they interpret the data and how they work with their staff to present that. That's the way we measure those two different competency types. So we're not trying to measure those that Connie referred to earlier, those such as building trust, that are hard to measure in some of these any other way. And the last piece was that we, in the interest of transparency, we put together a follow-up session for all the candidates. So within 2 weeks, either before or after promotions are announced, it doesn't really matter, we uncover the process. We bring them back. We show them what the questions were. We show them the score sheets. We really refer back to that briefing packet we gave them that said, here are the competencies and here we're going to score you. And we let them know these were the answers we were looking for. So the people who thought they really did a job answering but they may not have passed, they say, that was where you were driving with that. So we really pull the sheets off, and that give them a sense of fairness. And we also offer, in addition to the group meeting, individual meetings with the people, panelists, who they interviewed with. So they can pick somebody that they feel comfortable with. Okay. Our senior supervisory positions based on competencies and outcomes. The outcomes we really saw were that are you there? Acceptance by core HR. We saw that our sources saw our process. They liked the process. They had trust that where it was going was where they wanted us to be. We had increased acceptance of promotions by line staff, by the managers that said, yeah, you know what, we really feel good about the people who were promoted, and we thought they should have been the ones on the list. A layer of transparency. All reels from the announcement, job descriptions, briefing packets, etc., providing the questions a half an hour before, gave the participants confidence that the process was open and consistent. The brief packet described every step in the way, and the process reveals the answer and shows that there were been the attributes that we had provided to them previously. So we're hearing a lot less of, well, it's still a good old boy process. Okay. And we have now, in our outcomes, we're now using competencies for all positions. So we've now competencies not just for our supervisors, but our officers, our division directors, our deputy chiefs, and the chief. Last year, I had numerous positions open up in my division in business analyst, management analyst, victim services coordinator, communication systems operators, and my administrative assistants. I have an opening when we take that opportunity to build the competencies, because it just provides us with all of the materials that we need to go through the process of creating job descriptions and announcements and arguments for the panel. Like Orange County, Maricopa have also embedded all these competencies into the staff performance appraisals. With that, I will pass the ball over to Mr. Collins.
Well, good afternoon. It's great to talk with everybody. Thanks, Mark. We focused primarily on performance management, just as the attendees in this teleconference did when they identified the tools that they wished that they had to respond to the difficulties that we were facing. As a part organization in an EVP implementation effort with Maricopa, we really tried to focus on those organizational development areas in which we could create alignment with EVP values throughout the organization. So there were a couple of real practical issues that influenced how we spent that energy. First was general dissatisfaction with a county-wide performance evaluation structure and system that really did not give us the opportunity to identify exemplary behavior by our employees. It was very short on goal setting, and we were just generally dissatisfied with it. So we knew that we needed to alter that structure. We knew that this was a good opportunity, and we knew that alignment with EBP created an environment in which we see productive results coming out of that effort. I want to go into a lot of detail in terms of the process. Mark talked about that extensively, with the exception that we made a couple of critical decisions in the very beginning, and that was to create a steering committee that was primarily composed of our executive and middle managers that formed an advisory group to help us through the process. The second part of that was that we heavily invested in our county HR resources and integrated them every step of the way. They were active participants, as well as our union representatives. They were very vital to bringing a perspective to the table that helped us in terms of the buy-in and the ultimate support for the system. The addition there, of course, was the consultant that helped us with the technical assistance, a technical expertise to analysis of the data, so that as we were looking at these competencies, we could identify those numerically through a quantification process that they brought to the table, which were the most important to lead to the highest successful performance by an employee. So from a practical perspective, in California we have such diverse job functions in probation. We focused on two, that of the probation officer and that of the supervising probation officer. So by being in the dream team, our HR partner, our union participants, the incumbents in those job classifications, we went through one of the competency libraries that Mark had talked of and began to call what we believed would lead to higher performing kinds of employees. As we went through that, we used quantitative analysis to prioritize and came up with a list for each of those job classifications of 5 core competencies that every incumbent in job classifications would be evaluated on, as well as 7 optional competencies that we could use in combination of a professional development effort, as well as customizing to the unique job functions that we saw involving both of those classifications. So the process was a complete revision of our performance management or performance evaluation system. We've now implemented it and have been using it for well over a year and had some real success in terms of our opportunities to improve the way that we recognize the types of behaviors that reinforce and support EBP in general and demonstrate exemplary behavior specifically. What I'd like to do now is turn it back over to the team and wrap up.
We have a couple questions. If I can pose the questions, or if you want to go first.
I'd like to maybe just do this, and then we'll certainly talk about those questions. I just want to say that both Mike and Mark really demonstrate the vision we've had around this process, and that is the sustainability of it, the engagement of people throughout the organization, and the collaboration. Those themes and transparency, both of them talked about that in quite detail. And foundational theme of the work. And as you can tell, some had HR support, some not. I think it's a very good example of how you can take the process and bring it into your organization with or without human resources versus staff. This right now you're looking at the workforce planning portal. All of the tools that we used with both Mark and Mike are on this portal from start to finish. The competency library, how to do behavior-based interviewing, how to put it into performance management. These tools were created under a grant that CPS received with the Annie E. Casey Foundation. And part of the Casey Foundation mission, vision, and values is to improve the well-being of children and families. So again, juvenile justice, child welfare, probation, all of these things are important to them, and that's why these documents are now free to anyone who wants to use them. They're very step-by-step tools that anyone can use. So if you just copy that and put it in your browser, you'll be able to see that. And I think it just kind of, and I'm just so happy to hear how well these folks are sustaining this process that we worked through years ago.
And Connie, could add,
let's take the questions. I'm sorry? Mm-hmm.
If I could add one thing, that resource is tremendously valuable in that it is geared towards non-HR practitioners kind of a layman's approach. It's comprehensive, it is strategic, but yet it's understandable by someone that's not well historied in the HR processes. It's a real good tool.
Connie, the first question probably goes to Mark. How long of a process is developing competencies? And maybe going from when you first start developing it to when you're actually using it, whether it's in hiring, promotions, whatever.
Oh boy, it's of a process as you can afford to keep the group meeting regularly and allowing them to go back out to their teams to vet some of the materials and bring feedback to. I think we probably spent about 2 days or 3 days just with the training and getting the initial competencies figured out and what we wanted to use as competencies, understanding the process. From there, then we started building our attributes and making sure we were tailoring those to our department. And then we started, the time commitment is in describing the behaviors that are involved. You could probably have all of your competencies done in somewhere between 90 and 120 days. And then, depending on the level of automation that you have, it's starting to build those into your performance appraisals. But if you didn't want to go that far, you have all your materials that you need right there to go into your process at whatever scale. Say about 6 months should do it.
Your experience in working with agencies who develop competencies?
I think both Maricopa and Orange County, I think they were 6 months. We were in and out of their organizations supporting them. Of course, it all is dependent on what's going on within the organization, too. It could contract or expand. If people are going to do the full workforce planning model, several of the agencies we worked with, it took about probably about 3 months to go through the strategic alignment, data collection, data analysis, and identification of the gap closing strategies. The implementation of those strategies, when people are in the full process, takes about 2 years, 2.5 years. So to get your alignment and your plan done can be done in about 3 months with some concentrated effort, and then implementing whether it's selection processes, performance management, and cases where we've done full work with departments, so they have done several of these at the same time. So you're implementing a whole new system over about a 2-year period. And the key then is to evaluate over time the impact of those changes you've made. And that will take longer as the organization works through how, looking at how successful they've been with those new changes.
Okay. I want to remind the participants that if you have a question questions, you can either chat them to the panelists or put them in the Q&A section of the webpage, and we will answer those as we can. The next one is and maybe Mike and Mark both address this. What would you do differently in this process if you could go back and do it all over again?
Well, I think I mentioned in my invitation that we did tap the below supervisors to get feedback from the officers. Feedback that you get from it's all 360-degree evaluation of that position that's so critical, and we would have had a lot better, I think, with ours. It would have gone more smoothly and would have been more complete if we had done it like Orange County did, where Mike made sure he had his unions there to get feedback.
Mike, what would you do differently?
For us, I think the decision to bifurcate the process and involve only 2 job classifications may have been the most efficient, because now we are trying to work our way through those additional 2 classifications. The other part of that was we really honed in very early on the performance evaluations and that as an aspect of performance management without giving a really comprehensive perspective on how these competencies need to influence all of the model that Connie spoke of earlier, including recruitment and selection, but certainly in the promotional process. And that if we really are investing in these competencies, investing these competencies within the entirety of the organization, those other components must be included, if not simultaneously, at least within a reasonable strategic distance to that particular initiative. So the comprehensiveness of the model is its appeal, and it yields the true impact and results to the organization.
I have a question for anyone who wants to take it. Relating the material back to the original polls that we did. The second poll was what tools did they wish they had to address those workforce challenges. And the first one was improve the process to employee performance. And we've heard some experience with both Mark and Mike. Anything else that the participants should know or consider in addressing that performance management piece?
And I think both Mark and Mike have talked pretty clearly about this. I think the thing I'd like to tie to is the resistance and the law enforcement approach.
Okay.
Mark talked about this very clearly, that part of when you identify the competencies for the new work, you communicate that through everything that you do, and in such a way that people start to understand that this is the new way, and they hear it over and over, and they see it in all of their interactions with the organization and the business processes that Mark talked about. So resistance to evidence-based practice sometimes is a lot of it can be in the sense that they don't understand, or they think it might be something that's going to go away. It might be just a flavor of the day, and so they're going to try and wait it out. But when you start to make all of your business practices align with evidence-based practice, I think people start to see that this is not a fad. Just like workforce planning is not a project, it is a way of doing business. I think that through competencies and talking about what values and what are the behaviors we value in this new work is a good way of communicating the changes that are occurring. And in both cases with Orange County and with Maricopa County, we developed communication plans to help them talk to the organization about these changes in selection and in performance management, but it was always tied to evidence-based practice. This is why we're doing it. It all will be aligned. And that's what's the beauty, I think, of the workforce planning model, because it aligns strategically to where the organization is going. And it becomes, I think, a clear communication tool about change and about what's important and how people are going to be held accountable. So not only through performance management do you hold them accountable, but you do it through your training, through select people. It's through every process. How you promote through succession planning. You promote through those values and those behaviors that support the change, like for evidence-based practice, for example. And once people start to see that this is truly the way the organization is moving, the resistance goes down, or people leave. I mean, they figure out, this isn't me anymore. I like the old command and control function. This isn't the way I want to work, and they move on. Or they learn the new skills and go forward. So I think that the beauty is that it's customizable, it has sustainability, that everybody learns about this in group. These people go back into their departments. They're people who are on these teams, the design teams, whatever you want, the dream teams. They go back into the departments. They start talking about what they're doing. It just becomes much more fluid in the organization, as opposed to something that comes out of human resources or out of a management decision team. Having that buy-in and that integration of all levels, I think you can go a long way. But all is it's time. It is not an overnight issue, and I think Mark has been working on this, and same with Mike, for years since we've left their organization. So it's a constant vetting and tweaking as you go through any change in your organization.
Okay, very good. Just want to encourage the participants to both go on the website that Connie mentioned, the workforce planning portal. There's some wonderful information up there. Kind of got one last slide just to kind of summarize your point of view when it comes to this topic.
Yeah, and we've pretty much talked about it, and it really is that it is a strategic look at your staffing aligned with your goals, use collaboration and engagement throughout your organization. And it becomes a way of doing business. It is not a project. And I think Mike talked about all the business processes that were changed in order to reflect these new values and behaviors. And it can become very outcome-based, looking at how you move through evidence-based practice and you track how well that's working. It's all supported through these competencies and the way you hire, train, and manage your staff. So I think it's comprehensive, it's holistic, and I think Mark and Mike have hopefully given some ideas for your own organization.
Okay. Mike, any final thoughts?
I think it's just that what Connie said, it is a constantly evolving process. Within 6 months, you can have a competency set for a particular job description. That's true, but we are still working, continue to build these out. But the benefit to me in this was that once we had this, it became the foundation for all of those other processes. You've done all the work to bring that into alignment. It's been a heck of a time saver for all of us since we all came to this.
Okay.
The final observation I'd like to offer is that if we are trying to move California corrections towards EVP, and we're incorporating some of the very practical issues that are facing us now with realignment and some of the other kinds of things, these types of organizational development issues must be attended to. If we expect that we're going to be doing anything differently in the future without this type of strategic and fundamental change, our capacity within our organizations to really implement and move in a direction that we need to move is going to be severely hampered. And probably we aren't going to accomplish much in terms of that kind of change.
Okay. I want to thank Connie, Mark, and Mike for taking the time and presenting some excellent material. I want to remind the participants that give us a couple days, and this webinar will be on the Crime and Justice Institute's webpage for others in your organizations and across California to view. If you have any other questions of this or any of our other products or our webinars we've done, you can contact me, Zach Delpra. My email address is zdelpra, D-A-L-P-R-A, at crjustice.org. Or you can contact me phone. My phone number is 602-595-825. Thank you very much.